Homish King and Pierce pursuant to legislation last year where the state legislature was asked for $15 billion worth of taxing authority. The ask currently is $27 or $28 billion 9 months later. And in fact, as is outlined in my materials, the three parts of the program that have common funding will not be less than $250 billion before they could be completed. But this is an important matter because this is a very substantial amount of money for a junior taxing district. Indeed, it's the largest request for tax authority in the history of our state, and indeed in territorial times, no matter how you factor the money up from 1853 to now. So I'll leave it here, but I did want to bring it to your attention because this is going to be a most important matter. The funding, if approved by the local voters, would make it virtually impossible for the state legislature to fulfill its obligation under the McCleary decision. And it is a matter that I know you have limited resources and you can't handle every request that's made to you, but I would urge you to give this serious consideration. I want to thank you for your time. And may I just hand this to your staff?
If you want to hand it to our clerk, Jana, right behind you,
Okay.
she will distribute.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you for being here, and you did say that you did file a report.
Yes, it's filed in the office this morning.
Okay.
Thank you.
If I could just, Jacob Berkey was just asking me what to do with Mr. Fenwick's report. It's a complaint regarding the Sound Transit.
That's the junior taxing district.
Oh, yes, that you're on the ballot this fall, and so we will take a look at that and try to determine what the issues are. And our plan at this point is to assign it to one of our investigators to start taking a look at. Now, I should caution you, that's a very dense package that you are providing us, and we do have very limited resources. And with this, I think it's going to be very important for us to try to get something sorted out fairly quickly, since this measure is on the ballot in November. So we'll do our best. But
And I have contact information there in 2 ways, so that I'll look forward to hearing from the investigator if I can get further assistance. Thank you so
sir.
much.
See no other citizen comments or concerns, we'll move on to commissioner comments and concerns. And first, I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome Commissioner Johnson to our party here today. And I'd just like to ask you to give us a brief overview for the audience and for us on your history and what brought you to the PDC and what you hope to accomplish.
I'll try not to point fingers on what brought me to the PDC, but yes. Well, Ann extended the invitation to at least consider it. Ann and I worked together for, I don't know, the better part of 8 or 9 years at the city of Seattle. I grew up in South Kitsap and went to the University of Washington for undergraduate and law school, and worked in the public sector as an attorney for public agencies. And so I got very much involved in understanding how issues are handled and how legal processes work, but from the perspective of a lawyer who was essentially policy neutral on all of those things and just trying to make the systems work as well as they could from the legal dimension. So I think in that sense, both the public service background and kind of the policy neutral interest in having the public interest served by smooth functioning and having things open, because I've also spent 30 plus years dealing with open government issues. I think all of those aligned to where it made sense to allocate some of my retirement time to this kind of work. And so I was glad to be invited to and honored to be appointed.
Thank you. Thanks for your commitment and your dedication to public disclosure. We appreciate it. And it gives us a little bit of breathing room since we could only meet if all three of us were available. So, yeah. So, next item on the agenda is the minutes. And before I ask to have them approved, I'd really like to thank Jana for all of her hard work in effort that she's put in the past. And, you know, as times change, mythology changes also. And it's kind of my attention, and that because this is kind of our face to the public on what we do here, that maybe we need to move beyond action minutes, which is what I am used to running a meeting. I'm used to just having the action items in there. I'm short, brief, just as a record of what the organization's done. So I would like to kind of have a short conversation if we could. And Jack, any input you have, and if you want to add input later on after you've had more time, would be happy to take it then too, because everything kind of evolves here. So I would like to open it up for a short discussion of what the commission would really like to see added to the minutes or subtracted from the minutes, and how we get that handled. I know in the last session, we made a motion, and then I asked to have the motion brief, and then came back and asked for the reasoning behind the motion as a separate item, which we did, and was well done. Thank you very much for indulging me. I then forgot to ask Janet to add that to the minutes. So I need to make sure that when we do have clarifications after motions, that I make a specific request to Janet to have that added. So that was my call, and a change in procedure, I believe. So anything else Commission would like to see from minutes?
I think one of the things we've talked about over the last year or so has been to make sure that we are tracking well when the commission has a discussion and there's a request for follow-up, or specific issues are highlighted and direction provided, so that commissioners from meeting to meeting don't have to keep their own minutes and come back and say, okay, where are we on this, or here there were 4 or 5 things that were to be followed up on regarding this draft. So that there's a substantive reflection of the commission, that's something. So let me give a couple examples I would from maybe the ones we're looking at today. So on the delegation of authority one, for example, the reason that came back is when we reviewed that draft rule at a prior meeting, it had incorporated a reference to delegation of authority, and we had some discussion that we hadn't seen that policy as this commission's constituted, and it'd be great to see that and review that. So that's why it was to come back. And then at the meeting, we had some discussion about some critical things we wanted to see in that, and then that it was to come back in May or June. So just to maybe for us collectively to be able to tighten up a little bit in terms of the deliverables that come out, so that the minutes reflect what the next steps are and the timing of that, and what the commission's intent was. And the same I could see, to your point, Madam Chair, I would say the same on the penalty collection. We had some very specific requests a couple meetings ago, and staff came back, did a presentation, we asked for certain things, and then it's to come back again. So that might be an area where we could collectively decide with more specificity would be helpful, without creating 20-page minutes.
Do you think it would be helpful, and I've never seen this in minutes, so I'm just trying to problem solve here, if at the end of any presentation that we have, if we just have an extra area below it that says next steps, or follow-up next steps, something like that, and bullet points of what is captured from that, so that we can then, by reviewing the minutes, make sure that everything we asked for has been captured.
And we did, we started down that path a few months ago with James at a presentation. We started about concluding each presentation with what I'm taking away from this that I want to do next is A, B, and C. And that might be a good approach.
Well, I always like to have next steps be the last thing that happens at a meeting, unless it's the last meeting on the subject. And so, that's a sensible suggestion.
At the end of each item that we're discussing. Would that work for you, Jana? I mean, you need to be part of this
Yeah,
decision.
minutes are minutes. It's what you're gonna use to. I guess it's up to you as a commission, really. I've seen them done all different ways. I have seen minutes at high level, and then where the way that we've done it right now is that they've been at a higher level, and the managers and division managers are the ones that keep track of the things that are next step and that are up and coming. But it's a good point. How do you get to see those things? How do you know? How do you track them?
So
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Jen, so for us, I think if you weren't at a commission meeting,
Mhm.
can you tell from the minutes the substance of
Yeah.
what was discussed and then what's to happen next? Or if you were a staff person not there, can you tell sort of what the expectation, or for members of the public or stakeholders? So if it's too high level, it just feels a little too vague, or that you're not able to keep track of.
I think it just comes down to the commission's preference. I mean, it's changed over the time that I've been here. It went from verbatim to high level to I need more detail to, minutes are minutes. Minutes are time consuming, but we need them. And they may not be read every single meeting, but when we need to look back and reflect on them, they need to be right and you need to be able to grasp what happened at that second. So if you need it to be detailed with next steps, I mean, if that's what you need, we just need to make it happen.
I think it would, from my perspective, I try to take notes as we go along. But if I'm the person speaking,
Yeah.
then I'm not taking notes. So to the extent that you can be really clear and we can help remember, what's the comeback and when is the comeback, I think that would be helpful.
And maybe, Evelyn, maybe one, I know everybody's got limited time, but as Jana does a draft, maybe since you do have notes also, that you could be adding some substance back in that she,
I do.
yeah,
does.
she might not have picked up the importance of what the.
Let me say this too, minutes after a meeting, because I'm doing the audio and other things, I'm not taking minutes right here at the second. I literally have to set aside another day to relive the meeting. And so for me, it is not out of memory, it is literally going back and listening. And then I shoot it to Evelyn to take a look at it. It used to go out to the division managers and they've just gone back to trying to get things streamlined in them so that we can get them done out the door and get them, to where we need them to be at.
One of the things that we had discussed when we hire another front desk person, we have a vacant position, was that one of that person's duties would be some assistance to Jana with the minutes, and my thought was they could sit in on the meetings to take notes and then, figure out who does what on the minutes, because it is a really time consuming activity to go back and listen to the tape recording of the meeting and then create your minutes from that.
I think either way, you would probably have to give some guidance as to what was the substantive takeaway from that, or like on the discussion here about the strategic plan, you wouldn't know that we already had 2 discussions on the strategic plan, and that this is, so this, for the public looking at these, this was a deliberative process that we went through, and then we brought it back, and there was some just final tweaking at the end, but it was a lot that led up to that. So,
Yeah, I will say, I don't think it would have ever occurred to me to provide sort of the historical, the context of that. We can, but I don't think if I was thinking of, even now, writing up minutes, it wouldn't have occurred to me to say, the strategic plan came back for further discussion as we've discussed in the last couple of meetings, just a few final pieces. So I think that's helpful. I mean, if that's your expectation, if the view is tell the story so that anyone reading the minutes only has to read this month's and wouldn't need to look back and see what was happening last month, then we can think about ways to try to do that.
That might be more ambitious than what we really want to try to do. I mean, I think the initial point about recording, if there are expectations that somebody's gonna do something as a follow-up to the conversation, that be recorded. I mean, to my mind, the level of detail in these minutes is more than adequate to capture the substance, but having people walk away without missing some idea of who's got a responsibility to act is critical.
I think the only other thing for me, I'd say, looking at these is, in the motion, where it lays out Commissioner Bridges' statement, it's not, to my read, it's not really clear that this is all your statement. This is not so this was your motion to which we agreed. This is not a staff description of something. So when it says, the case was not proven, or the issue, we should make it clearer that this was the commission's position or vote or motion. It's not a third-party description of whether the case was proven or not. So,
It makes sense. I'm just worried about Jana and whoever else is working with her. Knowing what particular item we want pretty fully delineated in the minutes, as opposed to just having a transcript of everything. It's kind of
It's kind of like,
what Johnson said.
I'm hearing like, you want a little bit, you want both, is what I'm kind of hearing, is you want detail. I'm listening to all of you, and that you want the full, you almost want verbatim, but you don't.
no, I don't think so. At least for me, it's what was the substantively important issues that were discussed, decisions that were made, and actions that are to be taken coming out of that. So it might just be a little bit more Evelyn's eyes on it to make, so you're not having to sit there and spend hours on something. You're already capturing the essence.
Well, I mean, I should echo what Jana said, so Jana will do up the minutes and then she sends them to me for review and I will go through my notes on one screen and add in substance to catch it. But we still may not be catching the things that you would like us to catch, so what I'm getting from today is we will be clear, and so I may be pushing you guys a little bit on, all right, what are the things you wanna see next time so that we can get that really clear in the minutes. And at this point, I won't worry too much about, providing the historical context for an action, but we will be mindful of, the fact that this is sort of the story of the meeting for some members of the public and try to flesh it out a little bit. And we can certainly try that and then get more feedback from you the next time. But I will say, this is one of those areas, I know I've had discussions with Commissioner Levinson on this, is that we are so lightly staffed in the admin that any of the things that you want done regarding commission meetings, it's gonna be Jana and me doing it. Any additional reports, any changes, it's always gonna be Jana and me. Because that's, everyone else has different duties. So yeah, it does become a little bit of a balance of where's that sweet spot in getting it right with enough information so that it satisfies everyone and doesn't become an overwhelming task.
Commissioner Levinson, there may be a way to capture, let's take the strategic plan as we go, there may be like a word or a way to identify that item in the minutes saying that this is an ongoing thing without writing a whole book about it, but letting people know that this is also done prior, like it's in prior minutes as well. There might be a way to reference it.
I think that to me is a simple one. It's just that it's as a follow-up to prior discussions, commission discussions on the strategic plan, the executive director brought back final version for adoption or something.
If that's the level you wanted, I first heard that you wanted more of a detailed level. That's exactly what I was thinking, is that kind of a,
Just when I read this, for example, it looks like we spent 10 seconds on the strategic plan when, in fact, it's because all of that work and good work the staff have done over these meetings that we're able to come and make a quick decision.
okay. I think we can do it.
But we can try and you can give us
Yeah.
more feedback on it. We have
Yeah.
an opportunity every month to do it.
So let's follow up the next steps. What I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, is the information is, for the most part, okay. We would like a little bit more follow-up or next steps at the end of each item, if there is some. Possibly as introduction, calling it a follow-up to strategic plan discussions or something like that to let the public know that if they want to know more, they need to go back into last month's minutes. Remembering that minutes aren't necessarily always what we wanted them to be, because what we actually said isn't necessarily what we wanted to say, but it is what we said. So,
I know that
Oh, we
too
want
well.
those kind of-
Many aversions have been, yeah.
so, you know, the minutes are the actual reflection of the meeting, and so sometimes we're the ones that are not clear into what needs to have happened. So I would ask myself and the commission that if there is anything in particular that they definitely want put in the minutes, please state that at the time, just so that Jana knows. I'd really like this reflected in the minutes that A, B, and C or something.
Commissioner Easy, can I ask this? Would you like me to send them out even earlier? 'Cause
It'd be nice if
here's
we
my
could get a
dilemma.
draft.
When I get edits the day before or 2 days before, and granted, I don't send those out to you till the week prior. I'm in the midst of, many other things, trying to figure things out, and sure, I'll make the edits, but I'm not able to read and understand why those edits were made. If I give these to you earlier and get that back, then I can start understanding, oh, I see why they wanted that, or,
Personally, I feel like the earlier we can get the minutes, the fresher it is in our minds
Yeah.
also.
Yeah.
And we haven't lived life in 100 other different areas.
Yeah.
Not to rush you,
no,
but I think it would be beneficial for everyone if we could.
Okay. We'll try it this month, we'll start and see what happens, and we'll go from there.
Just to underscore, I don't hear the commission asking for more information overall. I mean, 7 or 8 pages of minutes is.
I don't want to read those.
And I don't wanna type them. I don't wanna type them. But no, I appreciate
The flavor
that.
and the substance of the meeting is what I think we're asking for, and that's a unique talent to have, and I think you've done a very, very good job. And like you said, the character of the commission changes the character of the minutes.
Very much so, and I
So-
fully accept that, and I'm aware, and I have no problem making those changes or trying something, to see if it's gonna work even better for us. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So, is there any other discussion on this? At this point, we have minutes from the April 28th regular council meeting. Is there a motion to accept, or would you like to work on them this month before we accept them next month?
Since there's nothing time sensitive about them, perhaps we could just go ahead and give the feedback and do another version for this, and we'll vote on it.
It's fine, I mean, these are minutes of a meeting, I wasn't gonna.
But you are so articulate. And there are also a couple of corrections we need to make.
So are you, so to clarify then for us, are you going to give us some comments back on those minutes that we can incorporate? Okay, and then we'll also have minutes from this meeting next month for you to approve, so you'll be approving 2 minutes.
As well as the special.
We're up for this.
I'm all,
We're all over this.
I know,
Minimum
please set aside time.
sets of minutes.
I guess I'd just like to say, I was present,
There you go.
versus commission members present. Jana must have decided that
You don't
You
care.
know, sometimes
it didn't matter.
I didn't catch that.
will do.
And we also didn't convene at 1 in the morning, I think, or read something like that, although we.
Sometimes
very
I
hard.
believe that you do,
It's not
sometimes.
So we have a few of those that we'll pass along.
So if we can just get the minutes out as is mutually beneficial to everyone, we can, I don't want you killing yourself trying to get them out
Oh,
by
no,
noon
just-
tomorrow. It's just, whenever they're done, go ahead.
Yeah, I usually prioritize them with whatever's going on, and that's when I start them, yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is training. with Chip Beatty. C1 and C1 PC registration forms. Thanks for being here today, Chip.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
So today we're going to be talking about the C1 candidate registration as well as the C1 PC committee registration form. And today what I will be covering will be what are the forms, when are they due, how filers can file those forms, and then basically the substance about the forms. So I've included in your packets copies of each of those. It's behind your agenda. The PowerPoint, it's kind of hard to read such a small print, so that's why I included that. So first of all, to talk about what the forms are, we'll talk about candidates first of all. Candidates have a requirement with the Public Disclosure Commission to file a C1 candidate registration form if any of the following things are applicable. If they're running for an office that's a statewide office, governor, superintendent of public instruction, etc., any legislative office, or any county-wide office, Snohomish County Sheriff, could be Clark County Charter Review, any of those types of offices. If they're not running for one of those types of offices, then we look at what the jurisdictional, the registered voter count is for the entire jurisdiction after the last general election. So if I were running for Thurston Fire Commissioner, Fire Protection District 5, and there were 6,000 registered voters in that entire jurisdiction, I would be required to file a C1 candidate registration form. And then last but not least, there are occasionally some people who are running in a jurisdiction of less than 5,000 registered voters. Say I'm running for mayor of Tenino, registered voter count 4,400 people, not required to file a C1, but I decide that I'm going to raise more than $5,000. And if that's the case, then, and that includes my own money that I'm going to contribute, then I'm required to file a C1. Committees are going to file the C1 PC when any of the following happen. When they first have the expectation of receiving contributions in support or opposition to any candidate or ballot measure, or they first have the expectation of making expenditures in support or opposition to any candidate or ballot measure. When are the forms due? So for a candidate, there are certain triggers, and we say that once one of those triggers happens, that a candidate has 14 days in which to file the C1 candidate registration form. Those triggers are if they raise or spend money for their campaign, they reserve space or purchase advertising, they hire someone to do either of those two things, they make a public statement that they're going to run for an office, or last but not least, if they've done none of those things during filing week, which was last week, they fill out a declaration of candidacy, which is the official form that gets their name on the ballot with either their county elections department or the Secretary of State's office. A political committee is going to also file within 14 days of either forming as a committee, expecting to receive funds, or spending funds. And if that political committee forms within 21 days of an election in which they're going to participate in, then they must file the committee registration form within 3 business days. They do not get the 14 days, 3 business days. So I just wanted to give you kind of a brief overview of what different types of political committees there are. So of course we have party committees, which would be the state party, county party, ledge district party, and the caucus committees. We have continuing committees, which are committees that just year after year after year are somehow involved, and this could be like the Washington State Firefighters Association PAC, it could be Boeing PAC, any of those types of committees. And we also have what we call single election year committees, which of course everybody thinks about initiative committees or ballot committees, but for our purposes, we also track things like school committees, fire committees, library committees. So if this year there was an election for North Thurston School District here in Olympia, and they had a ballot or a levy that passed or failed, at the end of that, we consider that election over. And for those committees that are going to be getting, those types of committees that are going to be getting regular payroll deductions from district employees, they immediately re-register again as a single election year committee, and they would choose 2020, 2018, whatever the next vote would be, and we would track everything towards that election. So those types are school, fire, special districts, library, that type of thing. We also have slate committees. This doesn't happen very often, but we have someone who will register to support a slate of candidates. And then we also have out-of-state or federal committees which usually do not file a C1 PC. Okay, they would file a C5 form, which is an out-of-state committee form. The only time that they would be required to file a C1 PC would be if they'd been in existence for less than a year, or if their expenditures in the state of Washington during that election year had exceeded 20% of their overall expenditures. And if that was the case, then they must register as an in-state committee. So how can candidates or political committees file with us, the C1 or the C1 PC? Well, they can always file on paper, okay, and they can walk that in, or they can send it in via mail, UPS, FedEx. We do not accept any filings via fax or email. And also file electronically. Electronically at our website, candidates and political committees can go to the website itself, and we have an application to file the registration form. Also at the website, we have the campaign software, Orca, which if they download the Orca program, then they can go in there and file the C1 or the C1 PC once they've set up the committee or the candidate's campaign. So talk a little bit first about the C1. What you see behind me here is kind of the top part of the form, and of course for a candidate, the important part is the upper part, 1, 2, and everything above that, where they give us all their pertinent information, their name, mailing address, contact, the office that they're running for, the jurisdiction, etc., whether or not they currently hold the office or not. And then in number 2, if it's a partisan race, they're choosing what their party affiliation is, and they give us the date of the election that they're running. A person could file a C1 today for something that they registered for last week, but someone could also register today for a campaign in 2020. So it just really depends, and that's what we use that information for. Box number 4 is probably for candidates, the important part, because they have to choose a reporting method. So under mini reporting, candidates say that they're not going to raise or spend any more than $5,000 with no contribution to exceed $500 from any one source in the aggregate except themselves. So no matter what office they're running for, if they're running for governor or if they're running for school director, there's a set limit here of $500 that it doesn't come into play if they were to choose full. As you're aware that every office has, many offices have a contribution limit, and so if I was running for the legislature, I have $1,000 contribution limit for the primary and for the general. Under mini, it's just $500 over the course of the whole campaign. Under full reporting, as I said, you can raise and spend as much as you want. You're subject to your limit, but then you're going to file subsequent reports. Under mini, when a candidate files their C1 and their F1, they're done. Okay, they don't file any more reports with us. No end of the year, no end of the campaign reports, nothing. Okay, now there's a little check and balance here, which you'll see on the bottom part of the form, which I'll get to, that has to talk about the public records. But under mini reporting, they still have to keep records. Okay, all the same records that they would keep under full reporting. They just don't file the reports. So sections 5 through 7. So basically, we require everyone to list a treasurer there. We tell candidates, if you don't have a treasurer, we get a lot of people to say, well, I'm not doing anything. Well, then you need to list your own name there, okay? Because the state law says that there has to be a treasurer listed there, so we just recommend list your own name there. There's a section there that talks about, do treasurers perform only ministerial duties? Ministerial duties meaning that basically they just do bookkeeping type of stuff. That's what ministerial is. And so in the past, we've had some compliance cases where we had a compliance case where we had someone that was affiliated with one campaign and also affiliated with another political committee, and the political committee was making independent expenditures for the candidate, and our point was you have the same person working on both campaigns, and so how could it really be independent? And so this part of it came in to let us know whether or not that individual that's working for the campaign and possibly another one is just doing bookkeeping kind of stuff, or whether or not they're making decisions for the campaigns. And that's also what number 6 is about, is basically if you have someone that is working on 2 campaigns, you have to list the other campaign there. Number 7 is committee officers. Basically what we say for people when you list your committee officers is that these are people that are authorized to make expenditures on their own. Okay, it doesn't need to be a consensus. They have the ability to authorize expenditures. Number 8, campaign banker, depository branch and city. While candidates are not required to open a bank account, okay, they are required to name where they would open a bank account should they receive a contribution that they need to deposit. Okay, so that's once again a required field. Related or affiliated political committees, there's normally not anything there for a candidate. Where there would be is, in one of the previous screens I talked about slate committees. If there was a slate committee that was supporting a list of candidates, then when the candidate filled out their candidate registration form, they would put that slate committee's name there so the public could see the interaction between the two. And then in number 10, one of the most important things is in the 8 days prior to an election, the public has the right to review any campaign records, and so this section needs to be filled out with an address of where the books will be, as well as a contact phone number so that the public can call up and schedule an appointment to review the books. Basically, the last box is they're certifying that everything is true and correct. That's the C1. C1 PC, for the most part, it's exactly the same. There's some additional information. So of course, the top part, they're going to list all the pertinent information, name, etc., telephone, mailing address. A couple of important things that are different here would be that, first of all, when we're talking about a committee name, if a committee is formed and at the time that it's formed, there's someone that is an 80% donor. So I start a PAC and I put $10,000 in there and I'm the only contributor. When I turn in the C1 PC, then it would need to say something like Smart PAC sponsored by Chip Beatty or Chip Beatty's Smart PAC. Okay, you have to list the name of the sponsor at the time you register if someone has reached the 80% mark. You also can no longer use abbreviations. So in the case, in the past, we would have committees that were sponsored by, say, BIAW. The public didn't really know what BIAW, not everyone did. And so now you can't use abbreviations, you have to spell that out. You're going to choose whether or not this is a new registration or it amends a previous one. You're going to choose the type of committee you are, continuing committee, an election year only committee. If you're an election year only, you're going to tell us which election, some of the other information, whether or not you're a bona fide party committee, whether or not you're an other committee, and then if you're a single year committee, whether or not you are supporting your opposing candidates. And if so, you're going to provide a list of those candidates. And then related or affiliated committees. So an example of that would be, say, firefighters local 4472 is affiliated with the Washington State Firefighters PAC as well as the National Firefighters PAC. And so you have to list the name of the affiliated committees there. Number 3 is just, once again, you're going to choose your reporting option. The important thing here for political committees is that if you choose mini reporting, so let's say I'm with county party, Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter, and I choose mini reporting for 2016. State law says that in 2017, if I want to continue under mini reporting in January, I must re-register and choose mini again. If I do not submit that, then I automatically flip to full reporting and have to do all the requirements of full reporting. So for those committees that are under mini reporting, it's extremely important that they re-register at the first of the year if they want to continue. For campaign manager, self-explanatory. 5, same thing as with the candidate, treasurer's name. 6 and 7, exactly the same. 8, same. 9's the same. Public records need to provide a place so that people can call. In number 10, political committees that want to make a contribution to another political committee must have received 10 contributions of $10 or more from 10 registered voters in the state of Washington in order to be eligible to give that. As well as if that political committee wants to give to a legislative or statewide candidate, they must have on their records within the last 180 days, once again, 10 contributions of $10 or more from 10 registered voters in the state of Washington. They check a box there that basically tells us that they're aware of that and that they meet the eligibility requirements. And that's basically what I have for you today. I'm open to any type of questions that you might have.
Questions?
I have one, Ms. Grady, if you file a C1 and choose option 1 mini reporting, and then you find that you need to change that to full reporting, you just simply file another C1?
Well, no, not simply, but I'll explain the process. So.
I mean, I think it must be a common thing because somebody will file, not know if they have an opponent.
It is.
and then
It is, and here's kind of the highlights of this, is that, first of all, you have to make a request to change from mini to full. So you send us a written request saying, I am requesting to change from mini to full. You include a new registration form, whether or not you're a candidate or a political committee, and you have that amended and you now show full. Okay, at the time you make that request, you cannot have exceeded the mini limits. So you can't have accepted a contribution larger than $500. You can't have gone over the $5,000 limit. You're going to include all of the paperwork that you would have had to file had you originally been under full reporting. So for every deposit that you made, you're going to have to include a C3 report. Okay, you can include one C4 report, which the C4 is the balance sheet, money in on the top, money out on the bottom, schedules that go with it. You're going to include one C4 report from the start of the campaign to the date of your request. Last but not least, you are going to include in writing letters notifying any opponents that you're making a request to change from mini to full. And that request needs to be into us, and going by memory here because I don't have it in front of me, but there are cutoff periods. And the cutoff period to change from mini to full before the primary, I believe, is June 20th, and the cutoff to change before the general is August 31st. And it has to be into us by that date and complete. Once we receive it, we review it. Once everything is in line, we make sure that they haven't gone over the limits and we have everything, then it gets passed along to Evelyn. She would approve it and we would notify them that they're now under full reporting. That's the process.
I think I've only seen 4 of them so far this year, but everyone,
I moved my mic so it was picking up my typing. So I said I think I've only seen 4 of them so far this year, and each one is very clear that, you know, they got into the race and soon realized that they were going to need to raise more than $5,000. I don't remember whether it was because they had an opponent. I think it's just, you know, doing mailings is just more expensive than people realized.
So just for Commissioner Johnson, one of the reasons we've added this item of training onto the agendas is not only to bring everybody up to speed, but also as part of our process improvement work. So part of what we're asking staff to do is report on what are the issues people have with this part of PDC regulation. So while the statute requires us to do certain things, the way in which we do them, we have some discretion. So if it's the forms are too complicated or the words we're using or the process steps. So an aspect of the discussion we always want to have is with regard to this, what is it that the staff get the most calls about, or enforcement actions or issues raised? Where are the challenges that the regulated community finds with this part of PDC?
Well, I mean, the most calls are the registration forms are fairly straightforward, and so most of the calls we get would be from, first of all, first-time people that just aren't sure how to fill out the form. And I guess other than that, most of the calls or most of the work comes about when we do the group enforcement for new candidates. There's a lot of people that may not have filed. They're aware of their filing requirement, but in the case of Commissioner talking about people maybe not having an opponent or something like that, frequently people will think, well, I'm not going to run a campaign, so I don't have to file this form. So it's just kind of a misconception about what the form is.
One of the things that has been done recently to help catch that just awareness issue is that now when candidates file for office, if they file at the county or with the Secretary of State, they will get a message from the Secretary of State's office saying, thank you, got your filing, you need to check with the PDC and file campaign registration with them. And it works really well because Chip started getting calls immediately from PCOs who are not required to register their campaign with the PDC. And so we're sorting that out. But that has been a help because previously people who filed didn't necessarily know that they also needed to register a campaign with a separate agency.
And one of our other initiatives is to try to consolidate or streamline if you have multiple obligations at local, state level or multiple state agencies, how do we make that easier for you as a candidate or committee? I also wanted to ask Chip that one of the issues we've heard on some of the other reporting is that the staff don't have current addresses and information. When it comes time to take enforcement actions, then we find out from somebody they are a regulated individual or entity is saying, well, I didn't receive this information or that information from the PDC. Is there anything on our form, any of our forms that tells people that they have an obligation to provide updated information? So on this, if at some point during the course of the campaign, any of this information changes, is it clear in the instructions they're required to update you on?
Yes, on the back, it talks about, if anything changes on the form, that basically you have, 10 days to amend the form to reflect the changes. And most of what we get, at least from the candidate side, is up to date because, as Evelyn said, we're receiving that information of either a mailing address or an email address from the Secretary of State's office when they filled out their declaration of candidacy. And so this is one area where we don't usually have a problem with contacting people.
And then what do we say with regard to the item 7, where we talk about committee officers and other persons who authorize expenditures or make decisions on your behalf? That's a pretty broad descriptor. So you have a campaign committee with people deciding how you're going to do advertising or what your strategy is going to be for polling, or is there a level of decision making? Is there a, because this would suggest that everybody on your steering committee might be considered an officer the way this is.
Well, the advice that I normally give if someone asks for a clarification here would be, out of those people that you want to list there, which of those people could go out on their own and just say, I'm going to put $10,000 worth of broadcast advertising with Fisher Broadcasting. They have that ability, okay? Frequently, there are people that get listed here that may not actually have that ability, but staff doesn't, when we receive it, we can't really tell. We can just go by what they say, but I've talked to candidates in the past who, maybe it's a judicial candidate for a certain office and they list a whole bunch of committee officers there. Maybe one of them's like retired Chief Justice Gary Alexander. Frequently people will use that section as kind of political ad maybe, but what we say is that the technical definition of that officer is that they're authorized to make expenditures.
So Chip, let me ask a follow-up. First, how often does that kind of question come to you? And then second, do we have something like your, explanation of does the person have authority to book $10,000 worth of broadcast advertising? Do we have that in a frequently asked questions or in some information for candidates other than them calling you up and asking you?
Well, on the back of the form, we have the definition of an officer, So I would normally point people towards that. I hardly ever get a question about this section. Maybe by hardly ever, we're talking about volume, and over the course of this week, I've probably gotten 100 questions about this, something about the C1, and out of that, there may have been one question that had to do with the officers.
So of the 100 questions you got, they were, as you described a minute ago, people trying to figure out whether they needed to file or?
Questions about if I previously signed up as mini, but now I drew an opponent, how do I change to full? I previously filed under full, but I didn't draw an opponent, and now I want to switch to mini. How do I do that? Campaign records, do I need to put my home address as the mailing address? There's just a myriad of different questions. As I said, a lot of time the questions are coming from first-time filers, and so they're pretty basic questions, but they have the question. A lot of times they're afraid of making any kind of mistake, and so that's why Jennifer and I are here, is just to answer all their questions.
And my last question on the form is just under the who must file, why we simply don't say all candidates unless you're from a jurisdiction smaller than 5,000 or you don't expect to receive 5,000. Why do we separate out?
Could you repeat that, please?
Just trying to figure out why we don't simplify, or why we couldn't simplify who must file. It's a very small group that need not file, right? Those who come from a jurisdiction of fewer than 5,000 and don't expect to receive more than 5,000.
Well, I think we look at it the other way. I mean, we don't really say who doesn't have to file, but we're saying who does have to file. Okay, so this is pretty much the same as in my PowerPoint, which is a legislative or statewide office, Supreme Court, state court, local jurisdictions 5,000 or more, or once again expecting to receive $5,000 or more. I understand your point. We certainly could probably provide some clarification to people.
We're kind of used to King County where everyone files, but in Eastern Washington, very few file unless it's a state office or county. As far as the $5,000 or 5,000 voters goes. It's not near as many. Anything else for Chip? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Learned a lot today.
I'll see you next month.
All right. James, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is the lobbyist demonstration. The thing about James, he always has a smile on his face. I really appreciate it. I wonder what you're hiding sometimes. But
Without taking a whole lot of time, I learned about 20 years ago that really how I feel is probably the only thing I have absolute control over in my life. And so if I get to make a choice, I'm going to make a good one. And I try to live by that. So I'm going to do just
We're gonna have to do something about
that. Even if you lock me up in a cage and whatever, I can still live somewhere in my mind.
Yeah, I do recall when we went through website after website presentation, you smile.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do just a fairly quick demonstration of the lobbyist application. We only have 20 minutes, and to go through the whole thing like we did last time would take a lot longer. But we have added a lot of polish to the application, a lot of help. Visually, it's changed a lot, and so I think the commissioners will be pretty excited to see the point that we've gotten to. And so this is what the entry page to the application now looks like. I'm not logged in or anything. We've changed the design of it substantially so that it looks a whole lot more like our new website does and kind of creates that flow of consistency for someone that's using it. And then we've started adding in all the help. And so right here on the homepage, there's a list of frequently asked questions that are directly targeted toward what do I need to know on that page. So we have already a fairly extensive FAQ for the application that you can search through. It has search functionality, but because of the way that it's designed, we can take individual elements of that and target it towards specific pages so that I get the information that I need on that page. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. And as you can see, we're working on the error messages as well, making them stand out nicely. That wasn't intentional though. Browser just remembering what I put in before. And here we go. So we're on the very first entry page, and we've started adding in some of the help here. Every single page in the application is now going to have this page level help block that describes in general basically what do I do right here at this point in the application. And then for pages like this one that have some more global help to them, then there'll be something similar to the FAQ that is on the login page. And so the other really great feature that's been added in is importing of the legacy data. So somebody that has already set up either an electronic filing account or they've even been paper filing, they can actually connect their new login to all of those existing accounts so they don't have to re-enter any data. And so I'm actually going to do one here. And the first thing we do is we just ask people if they have an existing filer ID and password, we can easily use that. If they say no, they can enter in the name of the firm and we can just put something in here to see. They can pick whatever it is, provide some information, and when you click submit, this will actually generate a help desk ticket so that we can get back in contact with them, ask them some soft questions that will help identify that they really are the owner of the account. And once they do that, then we link the two together. If they do, though, have their filer ID, it gets even easier. And so I'm going to do an existing one here. And there we go. And so it went, looked up all of my information. And so this is for the lobbyist, Smith and Associates. And I can see that right now we haven't imported any of the legacy filings. We're going to do that import as well. And so folks will be able to see, not edit, but be able to see all of the existing filings that they have. They'll be able to amend them in the old system, but not in the new system. And then every employer that I have a registration for with this lobbyist, page through all of them. And then if I have any employers that are via subcontract, this is something that's really different in the new application. In our older system, if you are a subcontractor employed by another lobbyist, it's really difficult for the member of a public to drill down through that information because in this case, we would, for this lobbyist, record Brad Richter, who's just a lobbyist, as the employer. So trying to see who's the person who's ultimately benefiting from the lobbying activity is difficult. Now we record the actual employer along with the lobbyist, and so when they're subcontracts, we represent them. You can see Brad G. Richter for Hamilton Controls, Brad G. Richter for High Sierra Ventures. So we know right here, no matter how deep down they are in the chain, you can see who's ultimately benefiting from the lobbying activity. And then if I want to create a new filing, and again, page level help that describes what's the intent of the page. and I can go in and create a filing. Now, because I don't have any previous filings, I can choose a reporting period, but I can't carry anything forward. But I'll just do one real quick. The minute I click here without even adding any information to it, it saves an initial draft. And so if I go back to this page, then we can see that I've got a draft filing. But the really cool thing is, I'll say create another one. And so now I can say, I want to bring forward something from a previous filing. So I'll just say do my August one. And I want to bring forward my April filing. And the only thing that's consistent maybe is just going to be my personal expenses and compensation, and everything else I'm going to do new. And I submit, and it creates a filing from my previous one. We've also enabled all of the import functionality, and we've done some, what I think is really great help for people, particularly that want to do an import. They're going to create a spreadsheet, and so for example, I can come down here to import personal expenses. One thing I can do is say I want to download a template, and here's my template. This one only happens to have 2 fields in it, employer and amount. Filling out these kind of templates is always a little difficult because, well, what exactly do I put in the employer, for example? So we spent some time thinking about how to address that. And what we did is we added to the help, there's some general page help, some help about importing data, including a link to the actual help page. And then this is a list of all the valid employers that I can use if I'm doing an import, so that they can see right there on the screen. Well, this is exactly what an employer needs to be, so I don't have to remember, did I put Inc., did I put Inc. with a period, in parentheses? I can just use the list that's right here to know what to put in my import file. And then similar kind of thing has been done for all of the import. They all have unique templates because they have unique fields, things that identify dates, how the date and the format for the date, so people know what to put in them. So lots of polish has been put in. We've got a lot more to go. The really exciting thing that's happening next is Thursday, coming up in a week. We had our meeting with our stakeholder group today. This is part of our every 2-week cycle. In a week, though, we're going to be sending out a message to them with some instructions, and our stakeholder group is going to have test access to go into the system, create accounts, link up all their existing lobbyists, and file some test reports. So exciting times to come. The next week is going to be spent a whole lot more on polish. We've got a lot of things to do. Kyle and I spent quite a bit of time going through the application yesterday, and we found, probably about 40 new issues. And it's a lot, but the exciting thing about it was almost all real nitpicky stuff. Why aren't these 2 fields exactly the same length when they go together? They should be the same length. Or on the username password field, we had a help instruction link. So, you type in your username and you hit tab and you want to go to the password field. Username, tab, and you went to the link to get help for it instead. So for a lot of items, we're down to that level of detail about saying, how do we make this really, really polished? So username, tab, I'm on the password field and I just start typing. So that actually felt really good that we were finding a lot of small nitpicky kinds of things. Do you have any questions?
Those look like really smart improvements to the system.
Thank you.
It's great. Thank you, team, for all the work.
It's more exciting every day.
It sure does, and we're getting really close to the finish line too. And so, of course, all the butterflies that go along with that. But we're really looking to put together a good release strategy that's going to make it easy for folks to file. If I can take a couple more minutes, that was part of the discussion with our group this morning about how we're going to roll things out. There's potential for a lot of anxiety about the application getting released, and now I've got a file. And so we're looking at how we can put together a phased release strategy where we give folks the first part of, so we release on June 30th. So before the July filing is due, so basically all through July, they can get in, they can create their accounts, they can create all the linkages to their existing lobbyist accounts without having to file through the new application. So that way, by the time we get to the end, they'll know that they're not gonna have all these crazy problems about, why can't I log in? I can't find any of my stuff. Where is everything at? What's this new thing? So they'll have a chance to get there. And a really neat thing is, for all of the lobbyists that we've imported, we'll be able to tell when somebody creates an account and connects to it. So we can go in for all of the electronic filers and we can do targeted messaging. So after we do the first rollout message, then we're gonna cycle through and basically say, okay, which lobbyists haven't created an account, and link them up that regularly e-file. And then do a targeted message to them, letting them know, here's when you're gonna need to do this by, do you need any help getting your accounts linked up? Take a look at the videos that we're putting together to see how to do this process. So we can go through that first month and do that really targeted messaging to make sure everybody who is currently electronically filing won't get stuck and revert back to paper filing. And I think that's a really of paramount importance. We know we can pick up paper filers as we go down the road, but getting those people who are willing to electronically file now and not causing them to go, I give up, I'm just gonna do it on paper, is probably the biggest win we can take out of that first month.
Is the F1 ultimately gonna look like this too?
Yes, we're gonna use the same technology to do the F1.
We're gonna bring the F1 down to just one line.
Thank you very much, James.
You're welcome, thank you.
We are running a little bit behind, but I think it'd be a good time to take a short break. And instead of 15 minutes, would 7 minutes be okay? All right, we'll see you back here at 10:51.